In the next few moments, you're about to hear something about Oak Island that no expert ever saw coming. A discovery that could finally bring an end to a mystery that has lasted more than 200 years. For the first time in history, someone has stopped speculating and instead identified what may be the exact location where a $300 million treasure is hidden. That person is Emma Culligan. And what she uncovered was so accurate, so unexpected, and so impossible to dismiss that the Oak Island team had no choice but to act on it immediately. Why? Because Emma didn't just suggest another possible dig site. She revealed a flawless alignment between ancient pirate symbols, historic survey markers, and modern underground void scans, all converging on one specific untouched spot on the island. A place no one has ever excavated. And if she's right, this could be the moment the world's longest-running treasure mystery finally breaks open. So don't even think about looking away, because what comes next may be the biggest breakthrough Oak Island has ever witnessed. And before we continue, be sure to hit that subscribe button. It helps us bring you more unbelievable discoveries like this. The morning Emma Culligan returned to Oak Island, the island itself seemed to pause. Not the usual restless winds the team had battled for months, but a strange, heavy stillness, almost as if the land was holding its breath. Emma moved with quiet confidence, a sharp focus that Rick Lagina noticed the instant she stepped out of the truck. There was something different about her. Something in her eyes that suggested she wasn't back to search. She was back to confirm. Rick had seen countless experts over the years, engineers, theorists, researchers, all chasing ideas. But Emma wasn't moving like someone testing a theory. She walked like someone who already knew where the truth lay buried. A thick morning fog hovered low over the swamp, rolling in slow, heavy waves that muted sound and gave the landscape an ancient, almost sacred weight. It clung to Emma's boots as she moved towards the center of the swamp, the mist curling around her as if the island itself was reluctant to reveal what she was about to uncover. Rick followed just behind her, watching as she studied decades worth of survey maps he'd examined for most of his life, maps that formed the foundation of Oak Island's entire legacy. Yet Emma read them as if they spoke a forgotten language brought back from the past. She traced faint, nearly invisible lines while ignoring the markings most researchers focused on. She lingered over shaded areas others had long dismissed. And each time her finger paused on a detail, Rick felt a familiar tightening in his chest, the same feeling he'd had during moments when he believed they were on the verge of something extraordinary. For the first time in years, the island didn't feel silent or stubborn. It felt alive. Like something beneath the mud was finally responding, as if water and stone had been waiting for the right person to arrive. The promise that had haunted generations, the rumored $300 million treasure, the legendary hidden vault, no longer felt like myth. It felt close, uncomfortably close. Emma knelt near the heart of the swamp, pressed her gloved fingers into the damp soil, and nodded to herself, as if confirming a suspicion she'd carried all along. Then she motioned for the team to come closer. The instant her equipment registered a signal, everything changed. A faint distortion appeared beneath the swamp's center, subtle, almost ghost-like, but undeniably real. Rick narrowed his eyes. He'd seen false readings before, sonar glitches and misleading anomalies. But this was different. This felt deeper, more intentional. Emma adjusted the frequency, and the image sharpened. The density of the ground didn't match natural swamp compression. It didn't align with normal sediment layers. It didn't resemble anything that should exist beneath a naturally formed wetland. Instead, it matched the signature of a deliberately constructed chamber, soil compacted, layered, and engineered centuries ago. Rick caught his breath. Before anyone could say a word, Emma swept the sonar across the area once more, and the evidence became impossible to ignore. That's when the image on the screen appeared, and it stopped everyone cold. Perfectly straight edges, clean, symmetrical corners. A hollow space that didn't narrow, twist, or fracture the way natural caves or erosion pockets do. This wasn't chaos created by nature. It was geometry, precise, controlled, and unmistakably intentional. Emma's voice dropped, tight with focus. Almost a whisper. "This isn't natural," she said. "Someone built this." The team exchanged silent looks. Not excitement, not disbelief. Something heavier. Because after years of searching, after endless false leads and promising surveys that went nowhere, nothing had ever appeared this clean, this deliberate. This wasn't a clue. It wasn't a possibility. It was a design. Rick stepped closer to the screen, his jaw clenched, his hands trembling just slightly. They weren't staring at a random anomaly. They were looking at a blueprint, a vault layout, the kind of engineered chamber you only build if you're hiding something incredibly valuable, incredibly dangerous, or potentially world-changing. Something meant to stay protected from generations of seekers. Emma's eyes gleamed with adrenaline and certainty. "This is the heart of the island," she said. Not as a theory, not as a guess, as a fact. But she wasn't finished. She began pulling up archived Templar schematics on her tablet. Storage vault designs from the 1300s, underground chamber systems, collapsible vault structures, and diversion tunnels. Then she overlaid those designs directly onto the Oak Island swamp scans. The match was undeniable. The angles lined up, the shapes aligned. Even the void dimensions were close enough that Rick couldn't dismiss a single detail. Emma explained how medieval Templar vaults often relied on false sediment layers to conceal entrances, especially when hiding treasure far from home. Wet ground was intentional. Waterlogged environments preserved timber, slowed decay, and discouraged unauthorized digging. Suddenly, Rick remembered something his father once told him. A strange, half-forgotten story passed down through the family about an underground nest beneath the swamp. A place old treasure hunters believed held something important. He had always brushed it off as folklore, a tale meant to unsettle curious minds. But standing there, looking at Emma's data, Rick realized those whispers might have been far closer to the truth than anyone ever believed. Emma continued, pulling up a Nova Scotia Templar route map, one historians had long claimed was inaccurate. She pointed to a missing marker near Oak Island, a symbol that had been dismissed as a cartographer's error. But when she aligned that missing marker with her new coordinates, everything snapped into place. Tunnel angles, chamber placement, swamp location. Every detail fit into a deliberate design that had gone unnoticed for centuries. Then came the revelation that changed everything. This chamber, Emma explained, wasn't built just to store gold. It was a repository, a seal, a place designed to protect documents, possibly artifacts, never meant to be found unless someone understood the code. Rick stared at her. If she was right, they weren't standing above a $300 million treasure. They were standing above a vault capable of rewriting North American history. A vault intentionally engineered, precisely constructed, hidden beneath a swamp that ordinary hands were never meant to penetrate. For the first time since Rick Lagina first stepped onto Oak Island decades ago, the treasure didn't feel mythical. It felt real, measurable, within reach. Without saying a word, Emma moved to the map table and laid a transparent overlay across the scans. Rick leaned in as lines formed circles, arcs, and angles, not structural, but astronomical. She tapped the center point, and the digital model shifted, revealing the night sky as it appeared in the year 1347. Instantly, the swamp coordinates aligned with an invisible axis stretching north. As she rotated the projection, Polaris locked directly above the center of the swamp. And in that moment, it became clear. This wasn't just buried treasure. It was a message, sealed in earth, stone, and stars. The coordinates were no accident. They mirrored the pole star with exact mathematical precision. Emma explained that early Templar vaults weren't hidden using surface markers alone. Their entrances, tunnels, and secondary chambers were encoded using celestial geometry. Without the correct historical star position, explorers were always searching in the wrong place. She pulled up a timeline overlay and began rotating the night sky forward through the centuries. Rick watched as the alignment slowly drifted, the star path peeling away from the swamp coordinate. Every major dig on Oak Island, Emma said, had relied on modern star maps instead of historical ones. The difference was only a few meters, but those few meters were enough to doom every attempt. Enough to make collapses seem like bad luck and flood tunnels feel random. Then she reset the sky to its alignment in the 1300s. The star path snapped perfectly into place, forming a triangular geometry that pointed to a single apex, Emma's exact location. Rick couldn't speak. The realization hit him like a tidal wave. In one moment, she had undone centuries of misinterpretation, thousands of hours of labor, millions spent, and the heartbreak of countless treasure hunters. The map hadn't changed. The swamp hadn't changed. The vault hadn't changed. What had changed was the way history finally looked at them. Before the team could fully absorb it, they moved into the swamp with the new coordinates marked. The first probe broke the surface and sank into mud that felt unusually dense, almost resistant. As it descended, bubbles rose slowly and deliberately, as if the swamp itself were exhaling. This wasn't how ordinary mud and water behaved. It reacted like something sealed. Marty crouched at the edge, watching the bubble patterns carefully. "This feels like pressure equalizing," he said. "Like we just punctured a chamber that's been locked for centuries." The bubbles weren't random. They pulsed, as though trapped air from a closed space below was finally being released. Emma didn't react. She simply noted it, saying this was exactly what she expected. She explained that Templar engineers were masters of hydraulic deception. They designed swamp layers to disguise vault entrances, using water pressure as a seal to preserve what lay beneath. This wasn't a warning sign. It was confirmation. As the gas dispersed, a faint scent drifted upward. Rick noticed it first, ancient, earthy, woody. Not the smell of rot, but preserved timber, the kind formed only when structural wood is sealed away from oxygen for centuries. He exchanged a look with Marty. They both felt the same jolt. They weren't just probing mud, they were touching the environment created by the original builders. As the probe went deeper, the readings became clearer. Soft sediment layers gave way to something harder, possibly packed clay-retaining walls or collapsed ceiling beams. The swamp's surface tension shifted, forming subtle ripples that appeared almost geometric. It no longer felt like a natural swamp. It felt like camouflage, draped over an engineered structure. Emma watched the data stabilize, her focus sharpening. Everything she had predicted based on celestial alignment was matching what the ground was revealing. Star geometry dictated placement. Swamp engineering concealed it. Pressure dynamics preserved it. And now, all three systems were responding together. She stepped back and opened a new data window on her tablet. Seismic disruption readings from previous deep tests filled the screen. Normally, those scans were chaotic, fractured geology, noisy signals. But when she applied the corrected alignment, the data reorganized itself. Not into a single chamber, but into something larger, something branching. Emma adjusted the filters, stripping away lower frequency noise. Slowly, a long sloping disturbance appeared beneath the chamber they had already identified. Rick leaned closer, barely breathing. This wasn't a pocket. It wasn't a random cavity. It was linear, deliberate, man-made. Emma isolated the structure and overlaid angle measurements. The slope matched medieval Portuguese fort bunkers with near-perfect accuracy. She explained that these bunkers often used angled tunnels for two purposes: secure storage for valuable materials and hidden escape routes for those guarding the repository. And suddenly, the vault beneath Oak Island wasn't just a destination. It was part of a system. Rick had seen hundreds of tunnel-like signals over the years that ultimately led to nothing: silty fractures, water channels, natural breaks in the earth. But this was different. This signal carried a resonance that was too smooth, too consistent, too deliberate. A tunnel. The team watched as Emma traced it deeper underground. Unlike ordinary voids that faded or collapsed into noise, this structure continued on, maintaining its form. Instead of ending abruptly, it curved gently, following the precise geometry dictated by the Polaris alignment. Then came the moment that sent a chill through everyone watching. Roughly 40 feet beyond the main chamber, a second echo appeared. A rectangular void. Its edges returned a signal stronger than wood or packed clay. Stone. Emma froze the feed. This wasn't collapsed brick or scattered rubble. The angles were sharp, clean, exact. She zoomed in as far as the data would allow, and the shape became unmistakable. A stone door. Intact, untouched, preserved despite centuries of water and pressure. A cold shiver ran down Rick's spine. He had imagined Oak Island tunnels his entire life, but none had ever been proven like this. None had ever shown this level of structural certainty. "This is the most defined tunnel we've ever seen," he whispered, barely able to believe the words. Marty didn't argue. The evidence was undeniable. Emma stepped closer to the projected map, her voice calm and steady. "This system," she explained, "wasn't built just to conceal treasure. It was engineered to protect people, or to provide an escape route if the vault was ever compromised. A dual-purpose design. Rare, sophisticated. Almost never found intact after 7 centuries of weather, flooding, and human interference. Yet here it was, still holding its shape beneath the swamp, still guarding whatever the Templars had sealed inside." With the tunnel fully mapped and the stellar alignment confirmed, Emma directed the team to run a deeper seismic sweep along the corridor. As the probe advanced, the returns sharpened. At the far end of the vaulted chamber, a dense cluster of readings appeared, so heavy that the software hesitated before stabilizing. This wasn't the fuzzy echo of wood. It wasn't the uniform smoothness of stone. This was jagged, layered, dense, metallic, but not a single object. Emma zoomed in as the density map shifted into deep reds and blacks, the unmistakable signature of extreme mass. The signal formed overlapping contours, like plates stacked together, or bars collapsed under centuries of pressure. Marty leaned over her shoulder, his eyes widening. He recognized the frequency pattern from archaeological studies in Europe. Vaults in Spain, where gold ingots, chalices, and ceremonial relics had fused together underground over time. The match was nearly perfect. Emma expanded the mass field and initiated a weight calculation. The software processed density, volume, depth, and resistance. When the number appeared, she drew in a sharp breath. Just under 4,000 pounds. Rick blinked, stunned. 4,000 pounds of metallic material, buried inside a chamber engineered for stability, aligned by the stars, and sealed beneath a pressure-controlled swamp. Emma recalibrated and ran the calculation again. The number didn't change. Only stacked metallic artifacts, or a concentrated hoard of gold, could produce a signal this intense. At today's values, even a portion of that weight could exceed $300 million. And if the objects weren't simple bars, but ornate Templar reliquaries or ceremonial treasures, the true value could be far greater. This chamber wasn't just hiding wealth, it was hiding intent. Rick stepped back, struggling to absorb the weight of it all. For decades, he had dug, scanned, theorized, and hoped for the chance to stand within reach of undeniable proof. And yet, despite all those years, the swamp, the place they had drained, analyzed, questioned, dismissed, and returned to again and again, had kept its secret just inches beyond them. He thought back to his earliest days on the island, when he believed the treasure might communicate in some mysterious way. His father had once said it wasn't simply hidden. It wanted to be found, by the right person. Watching Emma stand over the scan, calmly aligning star charts and seismic data with the confidence of someone solving a long-forgotten code, Rick realized something he had never allowed himself to believe before. The island had finally chosen who that person was. Maybe the island had been waiting for her all along. Every wrong turn, every failed excavation, every collapse had quietly steered the search away from the money pit and toward this exact moment. For the first time, Rick didn't feel like the island was pushing back. It felt like it was responding, to the right mind. Emma cross-checked the mass readings with the tunnel's slope once more, refining her calculations. The data reacted instantly, as if a lock had finally been opened. The correct sequence entered at last. The weight of decades pressed down on Rick so hard, he had to brace himself against the equipment table. He looked at Emma, his voice barely audible. "You might have solved the island." Emma didn't respond. She was already pulling up 2 centuries of excavation theories, diagrams of the money pit, flood tunnels, collapsed cribbing, and the legendary layers of logs. One by one, she digitally dissected them and overlaid them onto the newly revealed swamp scans. What emerged wasn't a contradiction. It was a correction. For generations, treasure hunters had believed the money pit was the center of everything, but Emma calmly exposed flaw after flaw: the inconsistencies in early reports, the impossible engineering feats credited to medieval builders, and the simple truth that no engineer of that era would create a vertical shaft to protect a priceless repository. The money pit wasn't a vault. It wasn't even meant to store anything. It was a decoy. Emma presented evidence showing that its construction mirrored known Templar misdirection techniques: false shafts designed to collapse, flood, or exhaust intruders. The objective wasn't to hide the treasure deep underground. It was to draw attention away from the real vault, positioned laterally, and accessed through the hidden chamber beneath the swamp. Suddenly, the infamous flood tunnels made sense. They weren't random accidents or failed designs. They were alarms, hydraulic traps engineered to activate when pressure shifted near the money pit, ensuring anyone digging there would be stopped long before they came close to the true vault. Marty let out a sharp breath as the realization settled in. Every collapse, every setback, every maddening failure. They weren't mistakes. They were protections. Deliberate safeguards designed by a culture renowned for burying truth beneath layers of intentional confusion. The island wasn't a chaotic puzzle. It was a strategy. Emma showed how even the earliest searchers in the 1700s had unknowingly triggered the island's defenses by digging in the wrong place. From that moment on, every expedition had followed the same flawed assumption, that the pit was the heart of the mystery. But now, with celestial geometry, seismic mapping, and structural decoding laid bare, the truth became almost impossible to ignore. The vault was never beneath the pit. It was always meant to be approached from the side, through the star-aligned swamp chamber, down the sloping tunnel, and through the stone door where the metallic mass had waited, untouched. The map transformed before their eyes. No longer a mess of competing theories, but a single, coherent design. A carefully planned sequence of alignment, misdirection, and preservation, engineered by people who anticipated intruders centuries in advance. The chamber, the tunnel, the stone door, the metallic hoard, they weren't isolated clues. They were components of one unified architectural plan, executed with precision and hidden with purpose. In that moment, the island's story changed. It was no longer a place of confusion and speculation. It was the execution of a grand strategy, one that Emma Culligan had finally decoded, step by step. Satisfied that the digital model matched the ground scans perfectly, Emma led the team toward the swamp, her eyes searching for anything in the real world that might confirm what the map had already revealed. As they moved through the swamp, a thin layer of muck slid away beneath Emma's glove, exposing a sharply carved stone triangle. Its edges were unnaturally clean, its symmetry far too precise to be accidental. Rick nearly dropped to his knees. He recognized it instantly. It was the same geometric language seen in Nolan's cross, the same mathematical signature carved into the very framework of Oak Island. But this triangle was different. It was shaped like an arrow, pointing directly toward the anomaly Emma had identified. A marker that had waited centuries for someone who could finally understand it. Marty traced the angle with a laser level, and the beam shot cleanly across the swamp, landing exactly on the coordinates Emma had calculated. The alignment matched the celestial path she had mapped for the year 1347, when the North Star sat in its historic position during the final years of the Templar dispersal. Everyone froze, not because it felt coincidental, but because it clearly wasn't. The geometry, The star alignment, the precision of the Templar era, it all fit together with an almost unbelievable clarity. Rick murmured that this must have been the marker every previous search team had walked over without ever realizing what it was. Now exposed and undeniable, it completed the link between map, ground, and vault. Physical proof of everything Emma had just decoded. The winch rattled as the probe was lowered into the narrow opening. Emma triangulated the readings. For the first time all season, no one spoke, not even Jack. The metal rod slid down through soft peat, then silt, then dense clay, until it struck something solid. Thunk. A hollow structured sound. The unmistakable knock of worked wood. Emma's heart rate spiked as she cleared dirt from the monitor. The density signature told her exactly what it was. Medieval oak, waterlogged, dense, and incredibly resilient. The same type of timber documented in known Templar storage chests. They lowered a second probe. This time, the sound was different. A sharp metallic ring traveled up the cable like a whisper from deep below. Everyone froze. This wasn't debris. It wasn't stone. It was something forged, something valuable. Emma marked the depth, just over 27 feet. Exactly where her model had predicted, days before they had even begun scanning. Rick stared at her, unable to steady his shaking hands. This wasn't guesswork anymore. They were following instructions written 7 centuries ago by people who fully expected this vault to be found long after they were gone. As Emma ran the final calculations, the data settled into a single, undeniable conclusion. The mass readings matched high-density non-ferrous metal. The shapes resolved into stacked rectangular forms. The resonance values matched tested gold bullion signatures. The stone lining of the vault appeared intact. Nothing shifted, nothing collapsed, nothing breached. It was sealed exactly as it had been built. Emma turned to the team and said it plainly, without hesitation or drama. This is the highest probability treasure vault ever identified on Oak Island. Rick's expression fell, not in fear, but in awe. Decades of searching, decades of dead ends, frustration, and persistence. And now, Emma had given him the closest thing to an answer anyone had ever reached. He stepped forward as she pressed a simple red flag into the mud. No ceremony, no speeches, just a marker placed above coordinates verified beyond any reasonable doubt. As the sun sank low over the swamp, golden reflections stretched across the water, as if the island itself were acknowledging what had just happened. 300 years of legend, misdirection, sacrifice, obsession, all converging on a single point. One Emma Culligan had finally brought into the light. The place where the story might finally end, or where its greatest chapter was about to begin. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more incredible discoveries. Your support helps us continue bringing history and mystery to life.